Yeah. I'm realizing now that the sun is going down, I'm losing light, but that's okay.
Yeah, Ian is podcasting from outdoors today.
I was going to say I'm looking outside, and I don't see anything resembling the sun at this point.
Because you guys are suckers. Yeah, West Coast.
One day I'll go and live out there.
One day you'll join us in our hippie communes.
Basically.
Those are the best communes.
They are. They absolutely are.
I think I have to spread the gospel of soccer in North Carolina a little bit more, though, before I do that.
Yeah, you're not doing a lot to help out here. It's firmly rooted at the moment.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens when the Sounders inevitably have a losing season. That's not yet a prospect in 5.5 years that we've had to face. So we'll see what those crowds do then.
So Dan, the way we usually do this, and it's up to you. I don't know how much time you have tonight. But if you want, you can stay with us for the whole episode, and then that'll usually last an hour. Sometimes it stretches into an hour and a half. These things happen.
I think I can probably run till 11. So
okay.
We'll take it as it comes.
Okay. And then yeah, so we'll just basically run a normal podcast as if you were like part of the normal roundtable gang.
I will be a normal person for a change.
Do we have something that we need to cover up front since you have limited amount of time? I wasn't part of the planning to get you on, so I don't know if we're covering anything specific or if you're just kind of here.
I mean, the only thing I'll mention is part of the reason I offered to come on is I think I listened to an episode 3 weeks ago or something like that, and there was literally no reference to anything happening on the East Coast other than a DC United game. So I wanted to actually make sure that New York gets a little representation. I mean, the David Villa thing happening was good timing for this. But
perfect. Okay. Cool.
I'm happy to talk. NYCFC, Red Bulls. I was at the U.S. men's game on Sunday. So whatever works. I unfortunately didn't get to watch too many of the MLS games this weekend, so
I didn't either.
I mean, I watched the goal, the goal of the week stuff and Simon Borg, but that was about it.
Cool.
Hey, Simon. Oh.
Is that like a thing you do out of duty?
I feel like it. I actually, when I went to the media availability on Friday, I got to meet him because he was sitting in the row. He was sitting like directly in front of me with Greg. And he was very excited briefly to meet me, and he did not shout or sound like he was at a monster truck rally. So I felt happy knowing that he is actually a normal guy from time to time.
Okay,
it's actually kind of disappointing, honestly. I liked the pedestal notion of Simon Borg, the shouter talker,
always being like that. He was very like. He doesn't get like monotone or anything. He is excited, but he's not. He's just like normally talking and excited. He's not shouty excited. I don't know. This is way too much discussion about Simon Borg.
Let's go ahead and get the intro in so we can include all that and then jump into other stuff. Because I'm
sure.
Obviously, that game at Red Bull Arena is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well let's get it started and we'll go from there. All right, welcome to another edition of slashMLS podcast. As always, I am Pete, username PunkRockPete.
I'm Ian, username Armascarhu.
And very special guest joining us today, RMLS's own Remy DWD.
Hey guys, how's it going?
We're good. It's a nice Minnesota evening. The sun's going down. The amber beer flows. It's a good day.
Can't go wrong with that on a Tuesday night.
Sounds solid. Before we get too deep into it, Dan, do you want to give us a little bit for the listeners at home who know you from the boards but don't know the whole story? Can you tell me where your name comes from, since your name is not Remy, as I spent so long thinking that it was?
Wow, no, that disturbs me. I as a young kid, I had a small comic book fixation, like most young children, and I ended up reading some X-Men comics and like Gambit. So that's where Remy came from, and
Wow.
DWD just happens to be my initials.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I
You
just
know,
kind of had to slap them together.
I'm really glad I asked because I didn't expect that to be the answer, but in my head, when your name was Remy, I assumed you were originally from Louisiana. Like, it was very much an
See,
X-Men thing
see,
for me. Yeah. That's
excellent,
awesome.
good.
I did not expect you to say
I
that.
I
And
used to have a lot of people go, "Did you name yourself after the Nazi from Higher Learning?" And I said, "No, that's not my thing." But that was back in the mid '90s.
or
So
the mediocre um, what is the name of that? Not brandy, but the
oh,
other
Remy Martin, the fine champagne cognac.
cognac. That's what I was thinking of. Yes.
I'm sure those people would love if I hit would hand over my Twitter handle to them, but they have not offered me any money yet because I do just have at Remy on Twitter for my personal account.
Oh, well, there you go, Remy Martin. If you're listening, it's for sale.
You can't afford it.
Well, Dan, we really appreciate you joining us. We can always use a little bit more East Coast influence. When we have a full complement of our 5 podcasters, we actually have 3 teams in the East, but we don't always have everybody, and myself in Seattle and Josh in Portland can sometimes dominate the conversation and spin it towards the West Coast. So we're glad to have you, and I don't know, let's jump right into it. Anything
Sure.
you guys want to talk about? Let's start with MLS, and we can move to the Nats a little bit later. But any big games you want to start off with?
Well, it's weird, obviously, because the national team call-ups are happening, and RSL's like 3 different teams are starting like their 5th and 6th center backs,
Right.
which I feel like center back is the one position you can't really scrimp on in MLS. If you go downhill there, you're gonna go downhill pretty fast everywhere else. And I'm not just saying that because that's exactly what happened to DC last year, but that's part of it.
I think DC scrimped everywhere last year, but yeah, I mean, you look at RSL, you look at Sporting Kansas City, who's clearly been struggling this year, or over the last couple of weeks, not this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the Red Bulls too. A suspect defense does you no favors over this long season, and certainly some of these results this week, and the Portland result too, against Vancouver. Lots of confusing defensive moves.
So tell me about the game against New York. I watched the first half of that game, or not New York, against Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
Midweek. I watched the first half of that game. You were probably, I don't know if you were there or somewhere nearby.
Well, so that was on the road for us. So thankfully, I was not in Kansas City for that. I actually, that was the same night as the Azerbaijan game, and it was that brilliant Tuesday night doubleheader that I guess ESPN decided to do. And knowing that I could only realistically watch so much soccer in a week, I made the judgment call that I was going to watch the Azerbaijan game and actually skip the Red Bulls game because I had just seen the Portland loss from Saturday. I didn't feel the need to necessarily throw that into my field of vision and feel the pain. And so I was just following the game on Twitter, and in the first half, clearly I made the right call.
Mm-hmm.
The team got battered for the first 15 minutes. Probably should have been down 4-0. Somehow only came down 1-0. And then, the story with the Red Bulls this year is they can't put together 90 minutes properly. And so they bombed out the first 35 or so, and then slowly started turning around, and Sporting let them back in the game. And in the second half, apparently they just dominated it and probably should have won, from what I'm hearing. And so it's frustrating to watch this year when you know you're going to have that bad half somewhere, and you're going to have a good half, and you hope that the defensive mistakes just are either blown chances or good saves from Robles or something else. It's been a little tough to watch this year, especially after how well they did last year.
Is there a fear of missing the playoffs?
I think it's starting to materialize a little bit. I think if you talk to most of the Red Bulls fan base, there's always a fear that the team is going to be the worst team ever, because it's just a naturally pessimistic bunch. I think there's a sizable chance they might this year, only not because they're necessarily going to do terribly, but because the East has gotten so much better. You've got New England really fighting for it. You've got DC recovering from what was a terrible year. Columbus is sort of sticking in there. Sporting is still reasonably good. Toronto's on the ascension. You've got 5 teams right there. Never mind Chicago. Never mind Houston. Maybe Philly will turn it around at some point. So I think that if they keep letting results slip into, say, the end of July, there's a very real chance that they could be on the outside looking in, as we all like to say.
Are you higher on Philly than Houston then?
No, I'm totally down on Philly.
Yeah.
I think John Hackworth is one of the worst managers I've ever seen. And to be fair, my experience with MLS managers is relatively limited.
You would know. You would know.
Well, I've seen Hackworth speak after some of the games at Red Bull Arena, and he's just doesn't fill me with any confidence, even as somebody trying to look at it impartially. And yeah, certainly New York has had its fair share of terrible coaches over the years, but no, Philly looked great on paper, and then just they can't get it together this year.
I like that at no point in the last 2 minutes did Montreal get mentioned, because there's just no chance.
Well, because we just
there's
said
just
there's
not
18
going to be
teams.
recovered.
Yeah, there's 18 teams, and they don't exist.
I mean, the way I feel about Montreal, and I told you guys in the email this last week, is they're high variance. They'll have a couple of weird results just because they have 3 or 4 really good attacking players in Justin Mapp and DeVio and Jack Mack. But they don't really have anything else, and so they'll lose most of their games, and they won't make the playoffs. But there's going to be a result every month or so where we're going to look and be like, how the hell did that happen?
Who had to lose to Montreal this month?
Yeah, and it was New England this weekend. I don't think anybody would have put money down on Montreal beating New England, but
No.
Here we are. Blanks them 2-0. It's a weird year because a lot of the players and coaches like to say any MLS team can beat any other MLS team, and we've got this great parity. And even with as our friends at Offside Rules Radio like to say, the Liberace money teams, the Seattle, Toronto, New York, LA. It really is true. Any team can just fall into this void for a week and get battered by some team they absolutely shouldn't, which is fun to watch from time to time, but deeply frustrating that you can't. We keep having all these threads on the sub about I'm new to MLS, help me pick a team, and it's like, no, they're all the same. Pick one that you like the colors for, and that will probably do you fine, and you'll get 5 or 6 good wins over the course of the year.
Yeah, unless you live next to Montreal or Chivas, throw them out and then pick one.
Yeah, we'll build a little virtual roulette wheel, and you can just spin it, and it's like, here is your team, and it assigns the flair to you, and you're done.
I like that though. I mean, and this is not appropriate coming from me as a Seattle fan, but I feel like suffering for new fans isn't a terrible thing. Like, if you had a guy who became a Quakes fan in the year that they made, an improbable run on the Supporters Shield, that next year was certainly a trial by fire. How interested are you in supporting this team?
Yeah.
I like that idea.
I don't know about that, because based on Alicia Rodriguez's Twitter lately, she's just
poor Alicia.
It's
her soccer fandom is
I didn't say constant suffering. I want to see a solid mix. Like, I would be totally okay with the Sounders winning the MLS Cup or the Supporters Shield this year and missing the playoffs next year. I'm really, really interested to see what happens to the fan base when we actually have a truly bad season rather than just a disappointing one.
Yeah, and I think to that point, it's been fascinating to watch the New York fan base this year, because they did finally win the Supporters Shield last year, and I think there's sort of a long hangover that's come with that, where most of the diehards that I know are okay with a year of suffering, similar to how in 2008 they made that improbable run to the MLS Cup final and lost to Columbus, and then 2009 was just a complete shit show. Excuse me.
Although
So I
you guys
think
did manage to knock out Toronto in hilarious fashion in the last day of the playoffs.
yes, that was the one shining moment from 2009 was that 5 goal ridiculousness to keep Toronto out of the playoffs. So I think having that ability where a team that does really well can suddenly just fall apart the next year, and it's happened a lot over the last couple of years, where look at Colorado. They win MLS Cup in 2010 and are a non-starter in 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I mean it's happened to pretty much every team, honestly, in the last like 5 years. I mean, Columbus
Yeah.
has had their bad years. We obviously had we were a Haino red card away from hosting MLS Cup 2012, and then the next year we have a historically awful year. Um, I do want to get into the New York fan base that you alluded to, because it's kind of getting a little bit pulled in several different directions, especially with this David Villa signing
mhm.
and Lampard and coming in and maybe Mix or somebody. Uh, what's the sentiment over there like?
Well, it's a little tough for me to judge for real because the city is huge, and there's no way to easily get a feel for everybody at once, right? What I can say is this:
You can't tap into all 9 million minds in New York?
I've tried.
Cerebro style.
We're working on it. I think it's in Don Garber's office, and maybe I'll swing by sometime. Um, I think that the diehard Red Bull fans aren't going anywhere, and there are plenty of them, and they come to all the games, and they're very consistent and very loud and very vocal for their team. I think the Red Bulls will suffer, a loss of some of those casual fans who are just coming to check out games or because they have something to do on the weekend, especially those that are traveling from the 5 boroughs to get out to the games. Because there will be another team, and if they don't have a deep attachment, so be it. They're going to jump. There are certainly the handful of people who are averse to the idea that there is a team named after an energy drink. And
We saw that in a thread over the week.
yeah. I've seen 2 or 3 threads over the last couple days about that. I only read the sub on /new. So I'm just going chronologically, and I catch all these random. I have my opinion about something, and I want to tell everybody. Threads, which are absolutely my favorite. And I think there was a good point from one of the city fans today. I think it was D-Roy Jenkins about.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I like that hesitation.
D-Roy Jenkins.
D-Roy Jenkins. He has built himself a nice little reputation. But no,
In a very short amount of time.
I actually have talked to him quite a bit outside of Reddit, and I think he's learning to keep it a little bit under control. But he made a point in I think one of those threads about where the fans going to go today, that there are a handful of fans who will be new to the league and just want to be able to connect with a team that's starting up fresh, because there is something very empowering about being there from the first kick on, and that's something that you only get with these expansion franchises. So there are these pockets of people who will come out. I think NYCFC, David Villa is certainly a great signing. I'm not going to begrudge them that, and I'm still shocked they managed to get him on a free, because my understanding was he had a couple of years left at Atletico, but more power to Claudio and Jason for that. I think they will struggle with being in a baseball stadium. I think that as people travel out to Red Bull Arena for away games, they may be swayed one way or the other. And ultimately...
Yeah, because that supporter section at Yankee Stadium is entirely in the upper deck.
It's not in the upper deck, but it is behind the visitors' bullpen. And it's sort of... There's certainly a row of seats in front of it.
Right.
I think it's one of the bleacher sections. Apparently, one of the third rail supporters group asked to be put there because they didn't want to have people behind them complaining they were standing, because I guess if they were over, that one of the sections would be behind them. So I guess it was their choice in conjunction with the club, for better or for worse. Ultimately, I think what needs to happen with City and with the Red Bulls is they both need to succeed. If City succeeds only to the destruction of the Red Bulls, and nobody's coming out to Harrison anymore, and they become the Chivas, it's a failure, because the whole intent was to have a rivalry and to have two teams competing and to raise the profile in this giant media market. And if City fails because nobody wants to go to Yankee Stadium, or it's mostly empty, or the DPs don't pan out, or whatever it is, that looks just as bad, if not worse, because they've spent the last year and change promoting this new club, and it would be nice if it could be successful for a change.
So, what's the definition of successful for them?
For NYCFC?
Yes.
I would say successful for them is not about championships. I am somebody who firmly believes that if the Red Bulls won MLS Cup every year, they would not be any more popular in this marketplace. They can win CONCACAF Champions League this year, won't make a difference. Open Cup certainly doesn't make a difference. What you have to be is just relevant and part of the conversation. And championships help that a bit, but it's about name recognition, accessibility, merchandise being ubiquitous, being on, talk radio. I get a lot of stick from some of the City fans because I keep pointing to Francesa, this terrible blowhard who has this talk show. I've never listened to it, but I'm familiar with the name because he represents the sort of mainstream talk radio presence. And
yeah, I mean, when I go to New York, I see his name all over the place.
And there are other shows. You've got Boomer and Carlson, and a couple of these other guys, the Dan Patrick Show. There are these shows out there, and if you're not getting talked about in the same breath or segments as the Knicks, who are generally terrible, the Mets, who are generally terrible, the Jets, who are generally terrible, you're nowhere. And so if they're not, success for me is being part of the conversation. A good attendance helps that. Championships can help that, but it really has to be that you feel this presence in the city beyond just advertising.
Is it harder or easier then for New York to do that when soccer, as an entity in America, is so different from the other major sports?
I think there's a giant soccer market in New York. I think the challenge for MLS is not about necessarily competing against the NFL, NBA, MLB. It's actually competing against the other leagues, because New York City is so diverse and multicultural. You get all these Europeans coming over and folks up from South America or Central America, and it is not hard to watch these other leagues now. The Premier League last year on NBC was by far the easiest to watch sports league I have ever seen. Every game, live streaming on my TV, great shoulder programming around it with their match of the day stuff. That was so easy to watch. The challenge for MLS is being just as easy to watch. And the new TV deal will play into that, but I think they're up against the Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, European competitions, the Champions League. All of that is really what they're fighting for, because you can go to the soccer bars here and they're packed every weekend. And there are supporters groups for every tiny English club you can imagine. Watch out! Here's the Sheffield Wednesday Owls meeting at Football Factory this weekend. But it's really trying to break through with those fans first. I think you're always going to have casual interest from people who go watch other sports, and that can come and go. But you really want to get people who are already interested in the sport coming out.
Right. Well, I mean, when you were talking about the general media interest, like from the Dan Patrick Show or from Francesca, it's what I was meaning was sort of since soccer is it's such a different format just in general, and
Mm.
the way it's followed, and the supporter culture makes every like the experience obviously much different from that of the typical American sports. So it's hard to talk about American soccer or soccer in general in the same way that you would talk about basketball and football and all that, I feel like, to an extent.
Well, I think in terms of the experience, most of the people that I've, either taken out or gone to Red Bull Arena with, um, really enjoy the experience.
Right.
People who weren't soccer fans before or were or whatever else, that difference in the fandom is certainly there. My concern on the media side is, you listen to these guys talk on talk radio, and it's, random call-ins asking about a player or, should they trade for somebody. It's the same chatter that we're all having online about soccer now. It's just it happens to have a forum that's a lot more visible and that people, for whatever reason, really want to listen to. And I think if you're not getting that coverage, and it's not just the radio guys, but you look at the New York Times, you look at the Post and everything, and I know most of the guys from my beat reporting on the Red Bulls at this point. It's really tough for them to get anything in print about MLS, and that's got to change if we're going to have this breakthrough.
Dan, while we're still on the topic of New York, I know that the Red Bulls had an away game, but I believe that you actually attended a different match at Red Bull Arena this week.
Good segue. Yes, I was lucky enough to get a credential. I'm going to hold it up because I know nobody on the podcast will be able to see it, but for you guys, that's what a U.S. credential looks like.
Fantastic.
Nice.
It's for those listeners at home. It is beautiful.
It is red with some blue on it. It's very exciting. But no, I did get to go out to U.S. Turkey. Fantastic atmosphere. One of, but not the best crowds I've heard at Red Bull Arena. And it was nice to get to see the U.S. men's team there. It really struck me that the last time they came out to Red Bull Arena was back in 2011. It was a friendly with Ecuador, and that felt like an away game because I would say the crowd was 70 to 80% Ecuadorian, and that was a tough one to watch. This one, very very clearly a home crowd. The supporter section was loud and fantastic. The crowd was largely disagreeing with the referee, so that always gets you that extra little New York area boost of endless booing. And as for the game itself, Fabian Johnson's goal was fantastic interplay with Michael Bradley. Can't say enough good things about that. I thought Clint's goal was one of the nicest gifts I've ever seen one country give another. I don't think he had to actually kick the ball to score that. I think he just sort of walked into it. And I thought I actually thought Josie played really well. I know everybody is.
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of people around me. I was watching a soccer bar match, so a lot of people around me were very upset about Josie's play, and a regular on our show, Iron Goalie, the transfer thread guy, tweeted me about how terrible Josie was today. I feel like aside from scoring, he did pretty much everything he was asked to do. He needed to do.
He was playing that target forward role really well. He was holding off defenders. He was, dishing the ball off to other guys, letting the attack flow around him and picking a pass. He should have had a goal or two. He should have had an assist or two. He played a beautiful ball into mix that he couldn't do anything with.
He was a bit unlucky with some questionable calls his direction.
Yeah, he had that goal waved off early on for the pushing in the box and.
Right. An offside or two.
That breakaway where he was whistled for knocking the guy down. He played well enough. He just didn't find the back of the net.
I feel like if he plays like that against Ghana, he gives us a better chance to win than
Yeah.
otherwise.
And I think if you listen to Alexi and Taylor talk about it, Josie's going to start at the World Cup because nobody else can play that role on this roster. Wando's not going to do it. Johansson's not going to do it, and Clint certainly isn't going to do it. So if he can keep playing that way, I think the benefits of it will come out. But obviously he's been struggling a little mentally with the drought, and hopefully he'll come out of it. Now, speaking of struggling, the defense was just atrocious. I'm used to seeing bad defense at Red Bull Arena, but this was taking it to a different level. I made a comment on Twitter midway through the game that I'm not a tactics guy. I'm going to leave that to the Mats from March to the Match. But when I can sit there from my seat in the press box and see these passing lanes open up and be like, oh, a through ball through there, and then it happens, if I'm picking up tactical moves that I could make to break down the U.S. defense, it's bad because I am not the person who should be doing that.
It is nice when that happens, though, right? As an observer,
it felt so nice to actually call the passes before they came out.
Yeah.
Also terrifying that there was that much space in U.S. defense.
Yeah. So how do we fix that? I do feel like I know we conceded in the second half. I feel like we looked better with Beckerman in front of that back line, and maybe that's just confirmation bias because I felt a lot better just in general at halftime when I knew Beckerman was coming on.
Yeah, I think I'm not personally sold on Jermaine Jones, and keep in mind I'm not somebody who obsesses over the national team a ton, so I don't have strong feelings about most of the guys, but I like what Beckerman brings to the team when he's been out there, and I've watched him. And I thought that there were certainly less of those channels opening up when he was out there. I really hope Timothy Chandler doesn't get another start. The way he got skinned on that last play was just atrocious.
I mean, I get yelled at fellow pickup soccer players if I let that happen on Saturdays.
And really, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to go back to the Beckerman point, is I think not only I'm also a guy who is not sold on Jones and would like to see Beckerman. I'd like to see it the opposite. I'd like to see Beckerman get the first 45 minutes and see where we go from there. And for me, it's really the interplay with Bradley. I mean, obviously Kyle Beckerman's a great player, but the way he plays with the national team and with Bradley, in front of him or next to him, depending on how they're doing it, it's just he brings something that I don't see with Jones at all.
Yeah, I feel like when Jones and Bradley are on the field, it's basically like Bradley and Jones are having a conversation. Bradley's saying, all right, I'm trying to be right here so I can do this, and Jones is like, whatever, I don't care, I'm gonna do my own thing, and that doesn't work so well. Maybe I'm pessimistic or cynical.
Maybe it's just that Beckerman is better at covering defensively solo when Bradley is stepping up into the attack. I certainly don't have enough observations comparing the two to really give strong points, but as far as the eye test or the gut check goes, it feels to me like they work better as a team.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So what I'm more interested in than the actual game is the atmosphere around the whole thing. I mean, that media circus, they were on Good Morning America, Men in Blazers filmed a freaking 100-minute thing that I listened to last night, and I definitely didn't get teary-eyed at all, I promise. They were there from Thursday until the game was over, and it was nonstop, SportsCenter, everything. What was that like?
It was intense, and I don't want to get into the whole saga of it. I'm happy to tell people over a beer at a bar, but media credentialing for that game was not easy. I was told by U.S. Soccer they had received more media requests for that game than any other game they had ever hosted.
Wow. Including the Mexico game in Columbus.
Yep, including the Mexico game in Columbus. And part of that was Turkish media too, but they had overflow press boxes at Red Bull Arena, which I was in, and you could tell that this was the big game. it was also clear that part of the reason this was scheduled in New York, and I think Jurgen said this during the press conference, is because they needed to make sure that one of the games, they could do a little bit more media work. And so, Friday was really about that fan fest. There was a big media availability right before it. ESPN came out, huge for it. I went to the Men in Blazers event. It was a fun time, and they really did get the media coverage going, and I think it'll help keep things going towards the World Cup. And I think the city responded very well to it. I walked through the Fan Fest right at the end of the day on Friday. Lots of people out there, taking part in what's going on. Tons of people tailgating before the game. Tons of people, coming from all over to be at the game. It really did feel like, the right send off to get the team ready for the World Cup.
And now that's not an atmosphere that's happened before, is it? Around the national team, around any U.S. soccer thing, aside from when the World Cup happened 20 years ago.
To be fair, I wasn't following the sport as closely as I am now back during the run up to 2010 or 06 or any of them prior to 94, which I was somewhat aware of as a kid. But yeah, it definitely certainly compared to the qualifiers or friendlies in the past, it felt much different because I think soccer keeps taking small steps forward in the U.S. and certainly in New York, and it feels like there's this a better consciousness about what's going on with the World Cup.
That's why it seems like such unfortunate timing. Well, it's almost a double-edged sword. It's such unfortunate timing to be in such a strong group because I feel like not getting out of the group is really a wasted opportunity with the amount of eyeballs and media coverage that we're seeing this time, especially flaming out of the group stage would be really horrific. But at the same time, if we can overcome that narrative and get out against good teams, I feel like that's going to be really positive for the state of soccer in this country.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's sort of the gamble that Jurgen's got to play with, and this ties back to the Landon thing that I don't particularly want to get into tonight, because I've beaten that into the ground at this point. I think that if you listen through the Men in Blazers show from last week, and you go to the bit in the middle with Alexi and Tony when they were talking about the '94 World Cup.
That was the best part.
Yeah, Alexi drops this line that I just love, and I think he said it a couple of times. But it's not just about going to the World Cup and performing and, playing for yourself or playing for the badge. But it's about knowing that what you do on the field can alter, either for the positive or the negative, the trajectory of soccer in the U.S., as the '94 team did. And the way Alexi put it is, it doesn't matter if you win and it doesn't matter if you lose, just care.
Right.
And if these guys don't think about that and realize the ramifications of what those results will do if they half-ass it, they get blown out by Portugal, whatever else, I worry because it could be that setback, it could be that step back that I don't think any of us want to see at this point. But if they advance out of the group, that's a fantastic statement, and depending on how far they run after that, even just beating Ghana would be a fantastic statement, just to get that sort of curse off their backs.
Sure.
So what's as someone who's in the media, who's directly involved with a lot of people who talk about this kind of thing all the time, what does MLS, not even 10 years from now, 2 years from now, we've got a new CBA coming in, a new TV deal coming in, all of these academies are finally getting set up and are producing homegrown products that are a neat little way for people to skirt salary cap rules, and if they can't put all their salary all the money that New York City FC wants to put into the team, they can put it into academy, which probably helps U.S. soccer and everybody else more.
Hmm.
What what difference does this World Cup make in MLS in 2 years? And what difference does it make in 4 years? And does it make a difference at all?
It does. I don't know if it makes a difference to player development because I think at this point the U.S. has taken enough steps with major advancements to player development, the rise of the academies. I know you guys talked about pay to play going away a couple weeks ago. Those sorts of things are advancing the player development. What MLS really gets out of the World Cup is sustained interest in the sport. And I'm not embarrassed to say that, I went to 3 games the inaugural season by some stroke of luck. I was 16 at the time. Went to 1 Metro Stars game, 1 DC United game, and 1 New England game. How that happened, I still don't know. But then I stepped away from the league for a while. I was going to college, had other things to focus on, and it just wasn't a priority. But I came back to the league after the 2010 World Cup because it renewed that interest in me. It made me want to, take more interest in the local game. And so, I went out to Red Bull Arena, which isn't far from my place, for the LA game because I wanted to see Donovan play, and ended up, really enjoying the atmosphere and the experience, and that's how I came back to the league. So that sort of spark of passion that people can get from the World Cup, and that's not even necessarily just about the U.S. That spark can still develop if you're seeing good quality soccer and exciting matches across the board. Obviously, the U.S. doing well helps that a lot, especially Landon's goal in 2010. So they need that action at the World Cup to translate into engaged, passionate fans. So that's really what's on the line for MLS, and they certainly need to help that with things like the TV deal, like a much better CBA. But if the U.S. does crash out of the World Cup, and it's very clear after Game 2 that there's no way they could possibly advance, that will hurt because there's generally a bounce right after the World Cup and the season after of interest, right. Season tickets, ratings,
right?
So along that same topic, then, but a little bit in the future, we're looking at the issue of Qatar 2022, and I'm curious from your side on the media if you have any read on the likelihood of that actually changing. Is there a feeling among journalists or anyone else that you regularly interact with that this might actually be going that direction?
I think there's a hope, but I think many of us are resigned to the fact that that hope doesn't mean anything's going to change. FIFA is as FIFA does. The fact that those votes are secret ballots, even though the vote totals are listed after each round, a revote doesn't necessarily get us anything, and it will lead to potential fights with Qatar. It will, do you then give it to the U.S. just as a default because they came in second? Do you give it to Australia because they're also in the AFC, and that way it keeps it in the Confederation, and it's going to make the voters potentially a little happier in terms of the spreading the game stuff? Let's keep in mind, Sepp Blatter, the last time he ran for FIFA president, said, "This is the last time I'm not running again in 2015." What's he been saying this year? Oh, I'm probably going to run again next year. I don't have a lot of faith in that organization because this sort of corruption and inability to fix its own problems is just standard. It's not a surprise anymore. And I'm personally a little frustrated that everybody's so fixated on the labor problems in Qatar. Certainly the corruption, bribery stuff is worth talking about now, but Brazil starts next week, and last I checked, their stadiums aren't done either. I,
Okay, I
for,
subbed.
for me, I'm glad Qatar's like at least getting an early jump on building something, because at this point, granted, the human rights issues are not to be joked about, but there are very real problems with both Brazil and Russia, and I think everybody's just so fixated on Qatar because it was a weird country to win the World Cup bid that I'm worried we're going to overlook what's about to happen, because Brazil is likely not going to go off very easily, and Russia, as we know from the Olympics, has its own set of problems.
They'll who will they invade after that World Cup?
Yeah.
No, but so
Well, and we'll get the opposite, right? If it was sunny and high 70s for the Winter Olympics, we'll get an ice World Cup.
That would be awesome. Get out the pink ball.
Love it.
hey, why not? I mean, I personally would like to see. I just want to see these big events go to countries and entities and organizations that can pay for it. I'd love for Australia to get the 2022 World Cup and for us to get the 2026 World Cup, because then
Yeah.
you don't worry about these countries like having these massive riots because they're further impoverishing. That's probably not the right word. I don't care. I'm gonna use it anyway. Further impoverishing their populace and making pissing everyone off.
Yeah. And there are very few countries that can host a World Cup without doing that at this point.
That's true.
And I'm glad the U.S. is one of them, but who knows if or when we'll ever see it again.
It's like us, Canada, and Australia, and Germany, and England, maybe.
Definitely England.
Probably England.
What about the Asian countries? What about Japan?
Oh, they could do it. Yeah, I have faith in them.
Yeah.
I have faith in China to not really care.
I'd make a long tan joke, but I'm on the wrong podcast.
Yep, that one's gonna fall flat.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's
Much love to the open wide for some soccer team.
So what's the optimal MLS look like in 4 years? I think our playoff system needs a little bit revamping, don't you?
I think the playoffs definitely need revamping. I think it should probably get cut down to 4 teams, maybe
Like
6.
total?
Yeah, 4 teams total. Maybe a couple extras if you want to throw wild cards in. So you could do 6 teams where like 2 versus 3 plays each other, and then 1 plays the winner of that. In terms of conference alignment and the rest of that,
I mean, that'll work itself the way whatever.
Well,
alignment does.
I'd like it to work itself out in a way that we don't have to explain it in a complicated way to everybody. And I realize that a balanced schedule is an improbability with the way the travel in the country and everything, but there's got to be something better, because I mean, if you think about it right now, the Eastern Conference plays everybody in conference 3 times except for 2 teams they play twice for a total of God, I can't. That's 20,
I can do this.
25 games, and then you play it's 25 games, and then you play out of conference. You play either 5 of them at home and 4 on the road, or 4 of them at home and 5 on the road, and so that gives you 34 games. In the Western Conference, you play everybody else 3 times, and you play everybody in the East once, and that gives you 34 games. It's so complicated, and I've been lobbying to go back to 3 conferences, because at least then, like, you can say, okay, you play everybody out of conference once, that's 14 games, and then you play everybody in conference 3 times, that adds 18 games, assuming we're doing 3x7, and so that's 32 game season. Great, we're done, and nobody is confused about it.
And I feel like that's, maybe even a little bit more fair on the travel schedule as well, because, when you talk about those Eastern Conference teams that are going to play 3 games in the conference, and some of those trips are sub 300 miles over and over and over again versus the teams in the West and the center of the country. Kansas City, rough shape, the Pacific Northwest teams. So I like the idea of 3 conferences as well, and it expands really well from 21 to 24, right? Then you go to 8, 8, and 8.
Right, but that assumes that Miami, Atlanta, and Team 24 all come in the same year, which could happen, but it requires some planning on the league's part. I'm worried we're going to go to 21 next year and then 23 in 2017.
Yeah, I think that's
and you can't divide 23 at all, so we'll see. It's not. I favor simplicity in being able to explain the league over many other things, because it helps fans get into the league. The fact that we've had to write an FAQ and a newcomer's guide and still have to point to the league's explanations of its roster rules on such a regular basis, like, it's tiring.
And then if anyone asks about allocation money, we're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Well, and the rules are constantly changing. Like, conference alignment aside, when we're talking about the playoffs, like, even just the tiebreakers change every year. We reprioritize which tiebreakers come first, even if the rest of the format stays the same, and it's just a constantly shifting problem.
It's goals for, no, it's wins, no, it's goal difference.
That goals for thing was so... I was mad about that.
And I don't mind them changing it, just don't do it mid-season. It's so
that was funny.
Or the CONCACAF Champions League changed last year, where Portland got it, but RSL didn't.
That was ugly. That was really ugly.
Was over.
Yeah, and their defense was, well, all the owners knew about it, and everybody was fine with it. The problem is none of the fans knew about it.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's good for Merritt Paulson to know, and I'm glad he's happy. But there are plenty of RSL fans who felt absolutely screwed about that.
Because that's the consolation prize, right? Like, we made it to the Cup. We lost every major trophy this year, even though we had a chance at all of them.
Yeah.
And at least our consolation is we can go to CCL. Oh, just kidding, it's Portland instead.
Yeah, so I understand, Garber had that wonderful quote during one of the State of the League addresses last year where, he basically said, we're making it up as we go along. And that's fine to an extent, but as you make it up, you have to very clearly say, look, guys, we're making it up. We're about to change this. I want to make it clear that we're changing it so that you're not surprised at the end of the year when we say, hey, by the way, everything's changed.
Yeah, I feel like that's the common sentiment, too, is that we're okay with the league making adjustments as it's still growing and still looking for new fans and still doing all those things, but over and over and over again, transparency, right? Like, that's what it all boils down to, is make those changes but be transparent about it. Okay, you're gonna pay a transfer fee for Clint Dempsey. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's say why we did that and the fact that it's happening and how it applies to other teams.
You're gonna pay a transfer fee for Clint Dempsey and he doesn't go through allocation order? Fine. You're gonna change that when it's Maurice Edu? That's not fine. Like, why did Philly have to trade up in the order for that? That's so ridiculous.
I was told that had to happen because Philly paid the entirety of that transfer fee and not MLS.
But that's so backwards.
Which, yes, it's definitely backwards.
The league pays for it. You don't go through allocation. The team pays for it. It goes through allocation. Allocation is there to allocate players to teams that may not have otherwise had means to acquire these players that are coming back to the league. How does that make any sense?
So do you think any of this is going to go away with the CBA? Because I know they're going to demand free agency. And I don't know how much of that they're going to get, but they're going to get some of it.
Well, so they demanded free agency last time, and that's how we got the re-entry draft. So I think there will be... I think the main thing out of the CBA will obviously be about the salary cap and wage. I think the undercurrent, and to be fair, the Players Union does not do a great job of communicating what it's thinking about to anyone outside of maybe its own membership.
Are you taking a shot at my boy Eddie Pope?
No, I'm taking a shot at the Players Union. He's just one member of it.
He runs it, doesn't he?
He's like the director of player relations or something like that. I don't think he's actually the head. I think the other thing that you're going to see come out of the CBA is not so much free agency as it is a change to some of those acquisition rules. So for American internationals coming back, for the Hercules Gonzalez's of the world, you know, it should not be that your rights are indefinitely held by one team just because they lowballed you with a a $60,000 contract in 2008. There needs to be some more fairness for that. I would love to see her come back,
Right.
but
Yeah.
obviously he doesn't
He
want to
wants
go to
to.
Sporting.
Yeah, he won't just not. Right.
Well, I think he just signed with Tigres today, or I saw something on Twitter fly by.
Oh.
Yeah, that was reported earlier in the week, so that was just a confirmation. It must have been.
The other thing I think you're going to see come out of the CBA is probably some movement to better handle player trades, because I keep seeing these stories come up with players being traded on short notice to teams they have no interest in going to. Alain Rochot from last year was the best example of that. It is stressful on the players, it's stressful on their families, and it's I understand it's part of the game and part of the league and part of U.S. sports, but there has to be a limit at some point.
This isn't right, because it's not like any other country where you're being traded just means you're traded to a 1-hour train right away.
Right.
Like in England. If you're like that Rochal situation last year, I mean, a lot of these players are making, like, the median salary is about $100,000. So it's not like, travel isn't inexpensive even at that salary level. And when you're traded at short notice across the country from Vancouver to DC, and Bengelsson puts you in the starting lineup 2 days later, of course you're gonna suck.
And your wife is pregnant and about to have a baby.
That is also
Yeah, it was a bad scene for him, and I don't blame him for being pissed off about it. So I'm hoping the players' union will try and address that, because I don't want to see players, either U.S. players trying to come back like Mix last year, or existing players who are getting bounced around. We're gonna have a expansion draft coming up, and that will probably move some players around needlessly, as it did when we had the Portland Vancouver one.
We'll send Lamar Nagel away for another year and then bring him back, and he'll just be even better.
There you go.
I totally understand the need for expansion drafts, but it's rough as a fan.
Yeah,
it really is.
I mean,
you protect your 11 best players, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that so many fan favorites are not in that. Like, it's your hardworking, fire plugs. It's your open cup guys. It's the guys that you really have like an affinity for that aren't Clint Dempsey getting paid $6 million. You know what I mean? Like it's those lower tier guys that fans kind of glom onto that you're gonna lose in those expansion drafts. And yeah, it might not hit your team as hard as it could if you weren't being able to protect them, but it's an emotional toll, Ian.
Right. I guess I never. Because our team didn't come up from USL Pro recently, and so a lot of those guys are like who you cheered on for,
our
long-term lower leagues.
Yeah.
And I think it's either Portland or you guys, or maybe both, who's down to like 1 or 2 originals from your USL days. It might be.
I think we're both pretty low. We've got it's low. We got Zach Scott. Arguably, you could say Marcus Hanneman, but not quite the same. It's getting there,
Levesque. Yeah, Levesque's gone. I don't just think it's about the USL Pro thing. I think longevity of any player with any MLS team is becoming a rarity these days. You don't see rosters being able to stay together because of cap concerns and other player moves and waiving at the end of the year. And so, if you have a player that's been around for a year and done some fan events and built a little bit of a following, it does hurt very quickly. You look at New York, and Petke didn't make a lot of off-season moves this year, but one of the ones he did is that he, cut Brandon Barklage loose during the waiver draft or the re-entry, and he went, ended up going to San Jose. Brandon's an okay player, but the fan base really loved him.
Yeah.
He was really, really appreciated. Obviously had those 2 goals against DC, which sort of built his legend up pretty quick. And just, nobody understands why he's gone, why we picked up Richard Eckersley in his place, which I still don't understand. And the expansion draft works the same way. And what's worse about the expansion draft, and I ranted about this a couple weeks ago, is if you look at the records of the players that were picked up in the recent expansion drafts, particularly the Portland-Vancouver one, most of those players were immediately spun back out just to get allocation money, international spots, draft picks, like-for-like trades for players that were protected.
So just give them those things.
Yeah, give them some extra draft picks in the first round and call it a day. Don't make everybody else blow up their rosters just because. It doesn't help.
Or, I mean, if you have to keep it, then, I see that as being part of the CBA, like you were just talking about there being some sort of limit on, how quickly you can spin that guy back out, or, can I trade that spot? Like, rather than taking the player out of the city, can I just trade the rights for that player if I don't have any intention of keeping him anyway? Like, in the expansion draft, I'm taking the rights for Lamar Nagel. I don't have any intention of playing him. I'll see if I can shop that around.
Yeah.
But then Lamar Nagel probably still goes somewhere else in that situation.
But
right?
somewhere that he's going to stay and not be there for a month or two before being sold off again.
That's fair.
Right. If you look at those drafts, I mean, what strikes me the most is the first pick in that expansion draft was Dax McCarty. He got picked by Portland off of FC Dallas's list, and immediately, maybe even before the expansion draft was done, sold to DC United. It's like, what? I mean, Dax would have had a great following in Portland, and I think he would have, fit in there pretty well.
Yeah.
But instead they sent him to DC, where he didn't work in the system, and, he ends up coming to New York, which worked out pretty well for.
I would totally take that trade back, by the way.
I bet Portland would too.
No. I mean the D-Row Dax McCarty
Dax trade.
Oh.
That was legendary at the time, and weirdly it's gotten reversed, which I never thought would happen.
Well, D-Row lost 3 steps instantly after that hamstring injury against I think it was someone stupid too, like Cuba. He played for Canada against Cuba, got a hamstring injury, and then just didn't have it anymore. And then of course Canada went on to lose their next game 8-1 or something, and it's everyone lost on that except for you guys. So
I'll take it.
Well, Dan, I know we've kept you pretty late here. Do you have any parting thoughts?
Oh, I do have one more thing.
I'll go for it.
This is the RMLS podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So give us, I don't know, 1 or 2 entertaining stories as the chief mod of RMLS. I know there's
Okay. Let me make this abundantly clear, because I think there's a weird misperception. I'm not the chief mod.
I know, I understand that, but you're the one who's...
You're the figurehead.
I'm the figurehead because I am the one who is willing to write up, when we've got a rules announcement or a meta post or an AMA announcement, I'm the one that's out there doing it.
You're willing to turn that green flare on.
Yeah, you're incidentally the person who I've upvoted most on Reddit, according to RES, but that's that's only because of the best of RMLS thing where I...
Yeah, you should see my karma count when we do those at the end of the year. Makes me look much more active than I actually am. A couple funny stories. I'll tell you, I've got 2, I guess. So one actually just happened. So I do spend as much time as I can reasonably do looking for stuff that's violating our rules and taking it out. I don't think people realize how many bad posts we actually get and how much we have to pluck out and remove so that we're not getting 50,000 help me, I'm new, pick a team, terrible self-post spam, bad blurry images that somebody's taken off a TV, whatever. Our folder of stuff we've removed fills pretty rapidly. But just a couple days ago, somebody self-posted. They did some concept kits for David Villa to NYCFC, and it was very clearly a self-post because the guy's site name matched the the username, and somebody else had already posted, "Hey, if you're self-posting, you need to follow these rules." So I removed it and said, remove for violating our self-linking policies. Feel free to resubmit with appropriate tags. And as I was going through the filter right before I came on, I noticed that he had replied, but he's been shadow banned, so his posts aren't going to show up on the sub at all. But he replied to me and said, "Feel free to get a life." So thank you, username I'm not going to mention, for telling me to get a life instead of enforcing our rules. The one other thing I could mention, which was kind of neat, was I do coordinate most of our AMAs because I've got good connections with the league office, the digital team, and a lot of the clubs have sort of heard about us either from digital or other teams, and do just randomly approach me sometimes about doing AMAs, which is kind of nice. But I was out in Portland for First Kick last year, and was having dinner with my wife right after we did media availability for the Red Bulls, because it was Red Bulls at Portland for that. And I had come down after I finished that availability to meet up with my wife, and I saw over in one of the areas of the hotel, keep in mind that this was Saturday night of First Kick, and Sunday night was when the Portland game was. It was most of the ESPN guys, so Alexi, Taylor, Adrian Healy, I think Mark Connolly was there, and Matt Doyle, who I had just done this media availability with. We're all sitting over there. I went to sit next to my wife at the bar, and we were eating, and I text Matt, and I'm like, "Hey, do you mind if I stop by with my wife?" He's like, "Oh, no, sure, stop by." She's a huge Alexi fan. And so we come over, and Matt's introducing me to everybody. I'd actually met Taylor on the plane, but he introduced me to Alexi, and he says something like, Dan's from Reddit. And Alexi's like, "Oh, yeah, hi." Good. And so it was like, wow, Alexi Alalis has some slight concept that I'm a person associated with Reddit. That's kind of neat, I guess. So,
there you go.
I've been holding on to that one for a while.
That's awesome. Do you? Someone posited from our team that as the figurehead mod that you might have the authority to let us remove the from unofficial RMLS podcast, particularly because we have no competitors.
This is very true.
My question. Good job, Pete.
I will send some mod mail and ask if they would be okay with that. We do try and vote on most of those sorts of decisions.
We don't want to overstep our bounds, but we'd love to call ourselves the official, since it really is just us.
I haven't seen many others, so
I've seen a couple others pop up.
I've seen a couple others that get promoted on Reddit, but I don't think others that have the Reddit focus that we do.
Yeah, that's true.
I would definitely agree with that, and I think there are some for some team-specific subs, but none for the sub in general. So, but you guys are doing good work. I've enjoyed the show.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Can we plug you for anything before you go? I mean, most people know who you are. You want to throw it out there anyway?
Most people know who I am, but for those who want my sparkling insight and weird repurposing of links that I've otherwise found on Reddit, you can follow me on Twitter @GothamistDan, and I write for Gothamist and a couple other outlets, and I seem to be on a lot of podcasts these days. So if you hear my voice, turn the channel.
Well, thanks for taking the time, Dan. We really appreciate it.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Solid.
Right.
Solid.
That's probably one of our best.
Yeah, man, that went really well.
We got into like a really cool discussion too, like.
Yeah, I mean, just solid discussion and really good, like, easy segues, because it's like, let's talk about New York, let's talk about NYCFC, let's talk about the Nats team, talk about what's going on with the state of soccer in America. That led into Qatar or Qatar, apparently.
Some people say Qatar. Some people say Qatar.
I've always heard it Qatar. That's crazy.
I do hear Qatar a lot from my internationally minded friends now, but I also don't know if that's because they listen to a lot of Brits talk, and Brits like intentionally mispronounce foreign things.
Yeah, they do.
So.
Well, yeah, that went swimmingly. I'm sorry that other people weren't here, but that was really cool.
Yeah.
I did eventually get a text from Josh that say that he was stuck at work and wasn't going to make it. So, yeah. But he said he would definitely be there on Saturday.
That's good.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that? I just found a case of amber ales.
Oh, Ian.
One of which I'm drinking now, but the rest of them I'm saving for Saturday.
I might. Have you done like a full Century Club Power Hour type thing?
No.
I might strongly recommend against an amber.
Why? Ambers are the best.
Of course, that's what I drink. You know, I'm an amber, a red. You know, that is my wheelhouse, buddy. But when you're gonna drink as much beer as you're going to in a short amount of time, lager and pilsner is really where you should be. You're not drinking it for the taste at this point. You're drinking it to have a shot of beer every minute, and you will. I'm gonna tell you, I don't know about your drinking habits, Ian, but you will not make it if you're drinking ale.
I have been. I have not been drinking so much lately.
You should not be drinking ale on this podcast, please. I want you to make it through, and you're not gonna do it if you drink ale.
So
unless you find like a 4% ale, and then you'll be okay.
I have no idea what percent this is because it doesn't.
6.5 is gonna be my guess.
It's just bottles. There's no label. It's just like.
There's no label.
Yeah, no, there's not.
Did you buy that out of a truck? Where did you?
I don't know where it came from.
Pickup?
It's just a box.
Don't listen.
Okay.
You don't have to drink shitty beer. You don't have to go out and get your Budweiser or your Natty Ice or anything. Go get a nice Pilsner or a nice lager, a nice local, something high end so that it tastes good. But you want to go with like a sub 5%, very light, crisp, easy drinking beer, or you will get sick of it and you will get too drunk.
Okay. I mean, that could also be fun.
No. Believe me. You're going to get the right amount of drunk the normal way. When I say too drunk, I mean at the 60th minute, you're going to go puke in the bathroom and we're not going to hear from you until the next day. Sorry, I bailed on the podcast. This is the voice of experience, Ian. Let me do some quick math for you.
Okay. Depending
on your shot glass,
yes.
Let's say it's 1 ounce if you're not over pouring them. Some shot glasses are 1.5, especially if you're filling it right to the brim. Let's say that you're going to go for 1 ounce. You're drinking 8 beers. 8 beers in like 90 minutes. That is going to get you drunk very, very well. It's going to work great. And you don't need it. You don't need the ale.
Okay. All right.
I might strongly advise it. You are an adult and you'll make your own decisions, but that is my strong recommendation.
Okay.
As a somewhat heavy drinker and a guy that can hold his beer, I'm going to be getting Pilsner, and I never drink Pilsner.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I know we've talked about it several times, but I'm still not entirely sure what exactly we're doing. Because I know there was talk of also like watching a match at the same time.
That's my understanding. Now, we originally talked about it being a live thing, that we would essentially be streaming live, because it would be like you could turn on that game and then put us on as well, and it would be our drunken live commentary. But I feel like it might be better off to release it as an audio track that you could say, hey, for anybody that didn't watch the Chicago-Vancouver game who has MLS Live, go ahead and throw this podcast on while you watch it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm open to do both. We can stream it live and see if anybody wants to do it, but we haven't promoted it very well for something that's happening in a few days if we're going to try to get people to watch it or listen to it live.
I mean, the thing about Reddit, though, is that if you try to promote things in advance, it doesn't work.
That's true. It could more be like, hey, if you're reading Reddit while you watch Soccer Saturday, You
Yeah,
could be listening
it'd
to
be
us get
something.
drunk.
It'd be something to put down in like the match thread.
Right. Up in the streams and like commentary section, like
If one of us can actually like, that's not gonna work because we're gonna be too drunk. But I was gonna say if one of us can actually like run the match thread for that game,
no.
then that would be great. But that's not.
All we
gonna
have to do is just talk to whoever's going to run that match thread. It's going to be, I think we decided on Vancouver, Chicago. We can just kind of see historically who's running those match threads.
I don't know of any consistent Chicago or Vancouver fans.
Yeah, because you've got like Mau for Seattle.
That's the only guy I know who does match threads consistently.
Some Cruise dude does the Quakes threads a lot.
Oh, that's true.
He runs those.
I should know that because we've had him on.
We have. We should talk some more soccer and then wrap this up.
We should.
I feel like we can just kind of jump in. Like, we don't need an introduction since it's not a separate interview. Like, basically after we say goodnight to him, we can just kind of jump into whatever we're about to talk about.
Yeah. What haven't we talked about yet? We haven't gotten through a lot of these things.
Yeah. What if you had to go?
Well, we talked enough about the national team. I don't really care to talk about them.
Yep,
more.
agreed.
The Open Cup. We'll have more podcasts before the Open Cup happens again.
We can just mention the fact that the potential matchups came up and that we're excited about it. I mean, that can be a 2-minute discussion.
That's true. We also talked about a little bit about goal of the week. I have random thoughts that aren't exactly related to this week. God damn it! I meant to bring this up. I meant to bring up the most important national team goal in history when Dan was here, but oh well.
Yeah, well.
Because I think Sports Illustrated, I mean, it was a great series, but I think the 89 goal is overrated.
So what would you...
The Ernie Stewart goal against Colombia. That's my number one.
Okay. Where does Donovan against Algeria in 2010 fall? Is that top 5, top 10?
For the men's team only, probably third.
Yeah?
Yes.
I feel like it's
maybe even second. Even second.
It's because of the eyes on it. Like, you can go back and talk about, like, the 1950 World Cup, but 2010, because of ESPN's amazing coverage and...
I wouldn't put the Gagens goal even in... I mean, I guess in my context, the way my criteria for that might be different than other people's, but my criteria for that is what goal sparked U.S. soccer the most. That
Sure.
Gagens goal against England was great, but nothing happened as a result of it.
For 40 years, nothing happened.
Right. The Caligiuri goal was also good. It put us in the 90 World Cup. But I question how important that is, that we went to the 90 World Cup, to the 1990 World Cup. I mean, and I read an article today that's like, well, maybe they were going to take the World Cup away from us if we didn't qualify for that. But really, 5 years out, they're going to take the World Cup away from the United States, the big market they haven't gotten into, that's really big and really important. I don't think that's going to happen.
Money talks that we were going to host regardless.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like if Caligiuri doesn't score against Trinidad, we don't host. And I think if we host, the same thing happens. It's not like and World Cup experience is whatever. I also think that's kind of overrated. And it also doesn't change at all the approach of Bora Milutinovic training that team. The only thing that might change, and I will have to look this up, is if we get Milutinovic going to the World Cup. But I think we do because, again, we had the money, we had the clout, we were hosting a World Cup.
Right.
If you're a coach, that's like the biggest opportunity, one of the biggest challenges, I feel like, would be to take a country that hadn't been to the World Cup in 44 years, as it would have been had we not gone to the 90 World Cup, and make them into a team that advanced out of the group stage and lost to Brazil 1-0. Like, that would have been equally impressive and would have not at all been affected by whether or not we went to that 90 World Cup, which is why I think the Caligiuri goal is overrated. And yes, I'm putting all of that in the podcast because...
Yeah, it's perfect. You can start right at the beginning where you say, damn it, I meant to ask Dan.
Yeah.
Because
Oh
we can
yeah,
finish
you're
with
right.
like "Good night, Dan," and then you can go to "Damn it, I meant to ask Dan."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good
Perfect.
call.
All right, cool. So we just covered the most important goal.
Well, what do you
Um,
think? You haven't said anything about this.
my men's national team knowledge is not strong enough,
Okay.
for me to really have an educated opinion. For me, obviously, my most important goal is Landon because, like Dan himself mentioned, that was what seriously put soccer on my radar. I had been an extremely casual fan. Like, I was not seeking it out, up until that World Cup, and I got excited, and I had a couple of friends that got excited, and we started watching those games. And I think it came at a really good time for me. It was the summer that I was moving to Seattle,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, it was perfect. And so I wasn't moving until August 1st, and so I was in a very transitional job that I had gotten just to move. Like, I quit my main job and got this kind of temporary job working for the government doing the U.S. Census. And
Okay.
so it was kind of like set my own hours, work when I need to, that sort of thing. And so I had a fully open schedule to just watch the World Cup and enjoy it. And so, I start with that. I start with a very, very exciting cup run. And then I move to Seattle, where I have friends that immediately introduce me to the local games. So for me, the Landon goal is the most important because it just really, in
For
my
you
personal,
personally.
yeah, in my
Yeah.
personal soccer story, it means everything to me. But I just don't have the
And you're
history to be able.
and you're definitely not the only person that that's true for. I mean, obviously, people don't have that exact specific story, but I mean that fact, that that experience is lost. Like, I don't think about that a lot because I've been following soccer since I was 6 and since
Right.
1996, and I've been following the national team forever. And so, like, I remember '98, I remember that disappointment, I remember 2002 and that awesomeness, and so, like, it's difficult for me to understand like how important that goal was, how important that moment was. That holy shit, soccer can deliver just as that exciting moment that we feel when we watch, the New England Patriots, or when we watch the Los Angeles Lakers. Those moments that we feel happen in soccer too,
Right.
potentially to an even greater extent. Because I can't remember a single moment in my sports watching life where I went from like on the verge of nervous breakdown to complete hysteria so quickly. I mean, and I'm and it wasn't just me because there were a lot of soccer fans, and it wasn't just the soccer fans because there are, those videos weren't just a bunch of soccer fans. Those were a bunch of Americans, most of which probably hadn't, like you, gotten into soccer so much before then.
And the thing is, what I think that doesn't get enough credit in this specific type of discussion for new fans to the game is, you know, then and even more so this year, it's easier than ever because of the technological times that we live in. If you were becoming a fan in the 90s, there was only so much World Cup that was going to be on in America. There were only so many platforms you could watch it in.
Only so much
Time
MLS, by the
differences. Yeah,
way.
absolutely. And so, as a fan coming in 2010, where ESPN's coverage just absolutely killed it, and they had streaming platforms, and they had all this stuff going on, one of the things that impacted me most, without knowing it, before even moving up here to Seattle, was something that I found so cool while watching that cup was the live reaction shots that they would jump to in bars in Seattle and Chicago and New York and all across the country. Like, ESPN had set up these cameras to shoot live reactions of serious fans. And as somebody who was new to it and coming into it and getting excited, seeing a group of Americans caring so much about something that I was still getting excited about was really strong for me. It really it gave me the impression that it wasn't as small as I thought it was.
Yeah, and and that's really it. And that's the opportunity this summer. And there are a lot of things you can listen to and watch to pump you up for this. And I just feel like these experiences, when you put them on top of each other, the goal, the hope, is that they're even greater this year.
Right. I mean, and I think that's why it seems so important to those of us that have, really grabbed the game. Like in my 4 years since the last World Cup, soccer went from barely on my radar to my number one sport. The thing that I am the most passionate about, I read the most about, like, it surpasses everything for me. And so people like us who are evangelists of the game have even more skin in this particular World Cup because we know how much it can do for the sport at large. We know that a successful run and potentially getting out of an incredibly difficult group and earning that revenge against Ghana and being able to compete against some of the world's greats in Portugal and Germany could really mean the difference. Being able to take my own story of what it was like 4 years ago, increase the coverage, make it an even better production, make it more visible. U.S. Soccer's doing a better job of, the media day in New York and things like that, just being visible. Another episode of the U.S. March to Brazil airs tonight, and
Oh,
I'm
really?
sure is going to continue to be incredible. And there's so much riding on this World Cup for us to bring those people into the fold that were like me 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, even in our MLS, right? I see guys all the time. Like, I still feel like a newbie with only 4 years of experience. Granted, I've gone really hard in those 4 years, and I mean, I'm on a weekly podcast about MLS, but
Yeah.
I see guys that are constantly like, I saw my first Portland game in 2012, and I really got into the league, and so there's guys that are getting serious about it that are even newer than I am, and this is going to be their first World Cup, and it's just there's such an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I hope when the series is written 20 years from now that a goal from this World Cup is the one that tops that list.
Oof.
So.
And just for the to turn the knife a little bit more, it's going to be Wando.
That's fine. I'm over it at this point. I'm over it at this point.
I know you are. You're a good sport, and you're a supporter of the team. I just think it would be hilarious if that watershed moment comes from Wando after all the discussion we've had this year.
And he would totally deserve it. If it's gonna be anyone, I'm totally rooting for him.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He's a stand-up guy. This is gonna be his only World Cup probably.
Yeah, I think that's a fair bet.
Let him enjoy the moment. Let him do something awesome like that.
Yeah, he does have just the best story on the team. He really does. Yeah, I can't. I've become an even bigger Wando fan, like just in the last year of seeing that work rate and just seeing the interviews and hearing people talk about his work rate and the kind of guy he is off the field, and I've become a bigger fan. But what else should we talk about, Ian? We only have a few things. It's just the two of us. You want to talk?
We sort of got into story mode. I liked story mode. Story
mode is good. Story mode is always fun. I don't have a ton more to say. Mix is hot is a note here. I'm not sure if that's referring to his form or his looks. Probably both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is very self-serving is because if I get my hair right, I have mixed hair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
you want to push that as the hot thing right now. Like, ladies, this is what a good-looking man is. This style.
I don't have to push hard. It's working. So the unfortunate thing though is I can't actually play with that hair when I play pickup soccer on Saturdays because it gets in my face and I can't see, so I have to put it in a ponytail, and so I don't have mixed hair on the field, but I can have it off the field. That's probably what's more important. So.
I agree. Let's see. What about goals of the week? I only have one statement here, so I'm going to let you start.
I'm just I want to make more cheesy points about how good MLS is getting. How were we wrong? 8 weeks ago when we were talking about how there are 5 guys in the league who can put in goals from long distance. It seems like we've gotten 4 a week since
Yeah.
he said that.
Yeah.
From scored by different guys, I think. Like
And at least
Jean-Baptiste
some of
Pierazzi
them.
scores from like 40 yards out
Yeah.
this last week, and I'm like, all right, whatever, MLS. I mean, it's great because I mean, one of the things I hear from my uncle, who's an MLS downer and is like European soccer, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. And one of the things he says is, there's just, one of the things is the first touch isn't always there, which is going to be true for at least another couple of years. But the other thing he says is there's not a ton of like really quality goals, like long distance goals, like strikes that really space the defense. And I'm like, yeah, that's also true, but maybe not anymore. So I'm excited about that.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, just a few years back, like you said, we could name 5 guys, that
just a few weeks back.
Yeah. But yeah, this has been an incredible. I'm really looking forward to the end of the year to see what 64 goals competing for goals of the year are going to look like. That I think it's going to be just a ridiculous match of stuff.
We've had like 3 consecutive weeks where it's like 4 could be in that final 64, right?
Yeah, and we've had a couple of weeks in the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 of the last 4 or 5 weeks, we felt like there were goals that were left out that were going to get picked anyway.
Yeah.
I know that there were some great goals this week, and I know that this is going to sound like a homer comment, but I seriously can't believe that Marco Papa didn't get nominated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not wind, it's not a cross that happened to go in, it is just...
Well, to be fair, a Spindler's cross that happened to go in wasn't nominated, fairly so.
But that's my point, is that it was 100% beautiful, pure skill. Over the wall, beautiful curler, just world class. There's no goalie in the league, not even Raimondo saves that shot. And, for that to not get nominated, I do feel like it'll have to end up in the 64. We're only going to get so many of those a year,
I think
but
it was...
to be fair to the goals that were in, it was a good week.
I liked it better than the Rudy goal.
That's what I would...
Rudy goal was in there.
I didn't want to say that because that's even more homer. Like, hey, let me kick
I'll
a
say it
Timbers.
for you, then.
Let me kick a Timbers goal out to put a Sounders one in. But
I'll kick the Timbers goal out.
Fair.
I'll do that for you, Pete.
You're a good man. I appreciate that.
But
no,
you're here to protest.
That's right. That's what happens. You don't show up, you don't get to protest. What do they say? You can't complain if you don't vote. Yeah, man, you're absolutely right though. The quality that we've seen this year has been pretty impressive, and it's awesome. I love seeing that. Not only are we bringing new guys into the league that are getting better with those first touches and those long balls, but I think that the quality of the league from homegrown players and academies and all that stuff that we talked about, like it's all coming together right now, which again just points to how badly we need to do well at the World Cup. Oh God, Ian.
Yeah, I and you know this because you favored my tweet yesterday. I have a feeling we're gonna beat Portugal. We're gonna beat Portugal. We're gonna beat Ghana. We're gonna beat both those guys, and we'll be 6 points going into Germany, and they'll also have 6 points. So we'll both have qualified for the next round for that 3rd game, and it'll be great.
And then we're gonna get blown out by Germany because
It doesn't matter.
I know, but if we both go in with 6, then they're gonna want to win the group. As opposed to the idea,
because you'd rather play Algeria or South Korea than Belgium.
Exactly. But I there's a lot of scenarios that I've looked at, just like the way that it could play out, and I really do like the idea of Germany coming into a game where a result doesn't matter against us. But there's so many storylines. Like first and foremost, I want to beat Ghana. Like that's, I think not only is that.
I think we're going to. I
think so too. I actually believe that that's going to happen. I'm not as confident as you in the Portugal thing. I know you had your vision, and I'm really happy about that. I hope that you're right. I think we're going to beat Ghana, and I think that it's twofold. Not only do we need to do that, if we have any expectations of making it out of the group, we have to win that game. 1 point against Ghana is not going to get us to move on, barring shocking results against our other two opponents. But I think we're going to beat Ghana. I think that we could see very likely 5 points out of this group and move on with Germany. I think that is not unreasonable. And I know there's a lot of I feel like there's just two extremes right now. Nobody's in the middle on our chances. It's either doom and gloom and we're going to, fail out with 1 or 0 points, or there's no way we don't get out of the round. We're better than Portugal. But I feel like it's not unreasonable to think that we could beat Ghana and pull off 2 draws. And in my mind that means that Germany probably takes Ghana and Portugal out pretty well. I think that Germany looks at finishing with 7 points, and
well, we're lucky because Germany plays Portugal in their first game, and Germany is really good at first games of World Cups.
Right,
So,
especially in the heat. As that heat continues to wear on teams, it's going to get worse for most of them.
not us.
Exactly,
Except for
exactly.
Timmy Chandler.
Ugh. Well, he might not be starting. We'll
He
see.
better not be starting.
We'll see how Nigeria goes, but yeah.
That's what bothered me about leaving off Parkhurst and Goodson and Donovan. Not the whole maybe they're better, maybe they're not, because they definitely are. But the whole these guys, because we heard Beckerman. I heard Beckerman yesterday on the Men in Blazers thing say this Brazil thing, traveling around Brazil, is going to be nothing for us who play in MLS, who do this week in and week out. We go play in Dallas.
We play 9 games in 8
this summer.
3 games in 9 days, and
consistently. And they go play in Southern California when it's June and it's Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And Robbie Keane complains about it, and it's old hat for these MLS guys. Not to mention, we have been playing with the official World Cup ball all year. I feel like that's an advantage that I'm probably overrated.
Until the friendlies.
I don't care.
Until the friendlies where we're not using the official ball.
Because we're Nike sponsored.
I know the reason. That doesn't make me happy about it.
Yeah, because Nike didn't do so great with their jerseys, but whatever.
Yeah, Nike's not having a great year for the World Cup for us. If you're listening, Nike, I want you to know how we feel.
Yeah, and in that World Cup ad they made, Tim Howard was scored on a Panenka, so they can go fuck themselves.
Hey, all right, there's our explicit tag.
Yeah, I was gonna say we haven't had the fuck yet this podcast.
Our fuck ratio is very low.
It's been like an hour and a half in, and
I feel like we're better. We're on better behavior when we have media guests. Like I dropped the one F-bomb at the beginning of having Matt Doyle on, and then that was it. Like no one did it again. Like we have this thing where we're just we're on a little bit better behavior, and then we bring on John, or we bring on some cruise dude, and it's fucking flying around. But
yeah.
Ian, let's go out on this last note here. Today saw the release of the potential matchups for the 5th round of the Open Cup to see who would play who after we have the 4th round go down, and there were some pretty cool matchups.
Yeah, I'm excited because I'm either going to be here in Minnesota, and if they beat Kansas City, they'll probably host Portland, and so I'll definitely go to that. Or I'm going to be in North Carolina, and we're definitely going to beat Chivas. I think we were favored against Chivas, which wouldn't be the first time we were favored against Chivas, by the way. And then if we win that, we'll play the Galaxy again, and everyone's going to get excited. And it'll be right during the World Cup. Hopefully we'll have just... Hold on, let me check my calendar. I don't know when in the group stages that is, but...
Well, so the fourth round happens on the 18th for most teams, which is just 4 days into the, or no, I guess 6 days into the Cup, in
Right.
between the U.S.'s first and second game.
Right.
So
No games are happening when the U.S. plays.
right, all the way through. I saw that as well.
Um, yeah, the 25th and the 24th is when it's going to happen, and all that's happening is just.
And that's, but you're saying the 24th and the
Teams
24th
don't
and
care about like England and France and Honduras, so we don't.
the 24th and 25th would be the fifth round.
Yeah.
Awesome, that's fantastic. And the World Cup is still in the group stage, so we're still all fired up, and that's awesome. I'm actually really excited about the matchups on my side as well. For the first time in the era of not getting to outbid other teams for home rights, Seattle has actually won coin flips. Basically, since we stopped being the team that could just buy the rights to everything, it's felt like a little bit of a grudge, although it's coin flips that are behind closed doors, because we have not won a coin flip. Our number one game last year was flying literally as far as you can from the northwest corner of the country to the southeast to fly out to Tampa, which I made that trip recently. It's long and it sucks. And we've lost coin flip after coin flip after coin flip. And no matter who wins the game between the Sac Republic and the Quakes, either team comes to Seattle if we move on against amateur PSA Elite. So that's really cool. And then for me, either of those teams is a great story. If it's the Sacramento Republic, it's my hometown, it's their inaugural season. They're really hot right now. Like, for a brand new USL Pro team, they are flying high. They've got record-breaking attendance. They're winning games. They're doing really, really well. So if they then go down to Kezar, pull an upset against the MLS Quakes, and then come up, that's a great storyline for me. And the other one would just be a rematch against the Quakes. We have a pretty infamous game from 2 years ago where there was an
the question mark game?
This is the question mark game that. So it's famous for the question mark. For Sounders fans, it's famous because of that question mark, we had a guy who rose to prominence, Twitter name Sonar Riley, who basically set up a Ustream feed from his iPhone and from the stands at Kezar filmed the rest of the match. And so all of us on Twitter were able to find that Ustream feed and watch like a fan stand shot video. So that was nuts. And it also featured a alleged punch from Eddie Johnson to a San Jose player, not caught on film, but it was a big dust-up and a big deal. And it featured Cordell Cato playing for the Sounders to score the only goal to win that game, who now plays for the Quakes and will almost certainly get Open Cup time. So it's great storylines all the way around as far as we're concerned. Also, I think Portland has to travel no matter what, so I find that hilarious. They have to travel to, what do we decide? Either Kansas City or
Minnesota.
Or Minnesota.
Or they're coming here.
Right. They have to travel either way, so that's fantastic. And yeah, I'm excited. I've got my ticket for the Open Cup game because for us, man, with a 4,000-seat stadium and the Sounders having their best year ever, our Open Cup tickets sold out so fast. Oh my God, they were fast. I got in on a pre-sale, so I was okay, but like it was quick. So
yeah, we're gonna have to get together after our Open Cup experiences because I'm gonna head down to Kansas City. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah.
I think Minnesota United gets to play the first game on that new turf that everyone's talking about.
that sweet blue turf.
Is it actually blue?
No, it's
it's just Kentucky bluegrass, right?
Right. Well, and the joke is that the Sporting Kansas City front office has been saying for like a solid year now, basically joking that they were going to get the same thing that Boise State has for their football field, that they were going to get a sporting blue turf. And it's just kind of one of those things where they're just trolling and having a good time with it. But no, it's Kentucky bluegrass grass. it's still real grass. Yeah. They use it at golf courses. It's known for being a really like thick, lush, robust grass. It's very popular in the U.S., so should work out well for them. I'm gonna call it, Ian. I feel like we've had a pretty good night.
Yeah, let's do it. It's gonna be this is gonna be a rough one to edit because it's a solid hour and 45 minutes of pretty good content. So we'll see what I decide to do.
Do you want me to lead us out here?
Yeah, do it.
All right, well, that wraps up another edition of /MLS Podcasts. I'm username Punk Rock Pete for everyone here. Go ahead and follow us, tweet us, send us questions, concerns, or jokes at MLS Podcasts on Twitter.
Or at /MLS.
God damn it. Good job, Ian. Why don't you...
We're on iTunes. We never mentioned this, but we should. We're on iTunes, also Stitcher.
If you're listening to this and you're not using iTunes, you can. You also have the option of Stitcher and other Android products, but we are available. You can go to our Twitter page that has the link for the feed. And for Ian, Josh, Dennis, and Chris, I'm Pete. Everybody have a great week.
Woo! I guess I'll press this red button because I don't want to edit.